I was saying about Greenland. So again, I think the idea that, you can specifically ask about Greenland, see if it randomly, comes up in the analysis. Either one should produce a result.
See, we got Tim here. Hey Tim, I got you on speaker. Do you have any time, Tim?
I do.
Okay, terrific. It just we got an historic first, and then to have someone like you speaking with Gene, who has an historic first, then we'll have a double historic first. Alrighty. You must have been driving a Porsche somewhere.
Not today. It's been pretty nasty. Last night we had thunderstorms for about 6 hours.
Oh.
But I've got the top down on the Porsche sitting in the garage.
What kind of Porsche is it?
It's a 997 clear heads.
Is that your favorite one?
Yeah, I do enjoy the thing.
Yeah.
It's a great car, so I've got one.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for calling in, Tim. We sincerely appreciate it, and it's an honor. And thank you so much for coming back on to Mass Hysteria, brought to you by Massachusetts MUFON. So everybody out there knows you. I'm not sure how that feeling is, but Tim is the former Deputy Director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and national hero, just like Gene, both former military. Tim is a retired Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Marine Corps and intelligence operative. And Tim, we've got Gene as well, retired Staff Sergeant of the U.S. Air Force and intelligence operative.
Good to meet you, Tim. Great beard.
Hi, Gene. Yeah, something happens when you retire and you get old.
That's right. Right there is a great visual link. Jim was asking about links between our background. The fact we both grew the same kind of beard says so much.
Yeah, and working in the Middle East and South Asia, to have credibility, you had to have facial hair.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, you guys have a lot of commonality. Tim was in Beirut and Afghanistan. Did I get that right?
Yes, yeah, I served. Beginning of my last combat deployment was Beirut as a Marine lieutenant, and then my last operational deployment as an intel officer I was a task force director in Afghanistan. I was there that last year, and I helped, destroy and evacuate American embassy, and I was part of that disaster at Karzai International Airport there in August of 2021. So yeah, I was there.
So
had a good time.
Just to give you quickly, frame my background and experience. So I left the Air Force in '99, and then I was working as a contractor within the community through retiring in 2017. So, one of the probably parallel areas was I was helping with getting the oil and gas companies back into Iraq after the invasion. So working with Petraeus' staff. But I was particularly focused on the Al Basra area. General Salmon at the time was a commander. It was still under the British forces, and then had a little interaction with the oil security forces in the north in Iraq. So just to kind of give you a historical and geographical context of where I was bouncing around, probably around the same period you were still serving actively.
Well, I was there for the invasion of Iraq the second time. We followed in trace of the third ID. And now I'm a civil servant. I'm a GS-15 in the intelligence community. I actually had the pleasure of working with General Petraeus when he was a division commander up in Mosul, and was extremely impressed with him. And I remember the destruction to the oil fields. I was actually a company commander during the Gulf War.
Oh my
And
God.
I remember fighting in Alpha oil fields, and having crude oil up over my ankles and all that those volatile vapors and stuff just tearing up our senses, and we were covered in oil, and it was pretty nasty. The destruction and how all that pressure and heat caused a little mini, weather system. We had lightning, and it was raining oil on us. It was amazing to be there.
It's quite the industry.
Hey Tim, here's an antithesis. Actually, I don't know if you call it an antithesis or serendipitous, but here I go. And this is just a lead in for an interesting question that Gene had. So my statement comes from my cousin Robbie. Hi, Robbie. Wouldn't it be funny if the adversary spilled the beans? And this is with regard to Valeris's release to his grandson of his science and engineering journal of what we believe. Well, I believe it's either reverse engineering of a NHI originated craft, or it's a reverse engineering of how one would operate based on sightings. It seems like Gene's leaning towards, it sounds like it was reverse engineering of a craft, and I'm leaning that way because he keeps talking about the UFO. But Gene said, okay, well, how might the intelligence community have treated something like Chernohayev's material if it had emerged from an adversary program in the 90s? And I think it would be a massive security breach if one way or another this type of material, if it was touching on projects funded by defense, had just been sent over to Russia. Now you have a case where someone from the Soviet Union, in his final days, which is very sad, he had health conditions, had sent this over for use by his grandson, since he was interested in aerospace. How would you see that if something like that happened during the Cold War, Tim?
Betrayal, treason. As a military officer and as a member of the community, we want to have insights to breakthroughs and advancements in technology, where someone takes something that is at technology readiness level, 2, 3, 4. It is theoretically, but we haven't engineered a solution and we don't have a fielded capability. So technological surprise is never a good thing. And part of AARO's mission is to prevent that technological and operational surprise. And that's what we strive to. So we were looking for evidence of a new advanced capabilities that were detected in UAP reporting. People didn't necessarily report it as a adversary capability or a new ISR platform or aircraft. They just didn't understand what it was, and it was reported as a UAP incident. And then AARO would take the case, especially if these objects were detected in close proximity to critical infrastructure or operational forces. We're going to know what it is, because we live in a very, very dangerous world. And if you look at the development of autonomous systems, they're becoming more resilient and becoming much more lethal. So, as a civil servant, that's something that we want to understand to prevent surprise and being overmatched on a battlefield somewhere.
Tim, something, Gene, I'll let you field it. I'm not going to be a spotlight hand, but Tim, something that a lot of viewers or listeners may not be aware of. When we'd spoken back in May, which was very enjoyable, you had some involvement in vetting Lue Elizondo's book prior to it being released. Sure. If you could maybe elaborate a little on what was involved. And then the other question I had, and then I'll turn it over to Gene, he's a MUFON research member. The other question I had was, looking at the concepts that Lue had explained with anti-gravity bubbles surrounding saucers and why it was a certain shape. Had you run into anything like that at all in AARO for craft that was being investigated? So that's what I was wondering about for those
Sure. Two questions, and let me answer them in sequence.
Sure.
I'll start with the latter one once, as far as the anti-gravity properties of some of the material, these bubbles. Yankee Blue, it was a training instrument that was developed by the Air Force Special Access Program Management to train their new administrators. Started off as a legitimate training tool. It went out into the wild, was used as a tool to harass and just confuse and play with the new members of the SAPCO organizations around the Air Force. That object that was in Yankee Blue was your classic 1960s, shiny aluminum UFO. And the graphic or the image that's trying to show the overview of this program and how to protect the properties and how to communicate about this special access program, that was, code word for that was Yankee Blue, was actually this thing hovering and technicians in white lab coats pulling out modules out of this thing, examining it. So that whole thing was some type of anti-gravity motor. It never said anything about aliens or UFOs, but it was an anti-gravity capability, and the image was your classic UFO.
It was really anti-gravity?
Well, that's what it was labeled as.
Sure.
Instructions on how to protect it.
I see.
Which was brief to administrators in the SAPCOs around the world for multiple decades. And many people never knew it was a false program or read into it and read out of it, and they think it was real. So is that the basis for this persistent belief that the government has recovered and reverse engineered alien technology? I don't know, but how many people were exposed to? Thousands. And we also had evidence that program that got beyond the Air Force and was being adopted by another service for the same purpose, not for education, but basically for harassment and pranking of their members who were assigned to a thing. So that is a problem. And it's been dealt with, and the Department of Defense put out pretty explicit, clear guidance to knock it off. Remind me on the first question to make sure I address it.
Sure. The question was, I guess, I'm not sure how many people, if any, know that you were involved in vetting Lue's book,
Sure.
Imminent.
And it wasn't me, it was the office, because, we were the authority within the Department of Defense and within the intelligence community. We were the experts and understood the security concerns dealing with UAP, UFO disclosure. So when someone was to publish an article or a book, such as Lue's did, pre-pub on the CIA OD&I side, and then DOD had a similar program, Dobster, where they would send that to us prior to being published, and then our analysts would go through it. We would put it around the staff, and we would see if there's anything in there that would be considered classified or sensitive or aggregation of information that could give an adversary some insider advantage. So that's how we got the book, and it just wasn't Lue. We looked at virtually everything that was going through a pre-publication review by the Department of Defense before it was authorized. So as a civil servant or as a member of the military, we have access to privileged, sensitive, and classified information that we gained access through our assignments. That's not ours, okay? If we write something, we got to ensure that we honor a non-disclosure agreement to our lifelong commitments and agreements. So we want to say, hey, I'm not sure how I gain knowledge of this, and we're going to write it up. We're going to give it to the Department of Defense, and basically national security experts are going to look at it, and they're going to determine whether or not there's anything that has to be rewritten, okay, to protect national security concerns. So it's a common process used across the government. And AARO, it was within our remit, it was our mission to be able to understand sensitivity and security concerns dealing with UAP. And that's why the office was involved in the review of Mr. Elizondo's book prior to publication.
Yeah. All right. So Gene, yeah, please go ahead. You had some interesting Q&A and also analogies that we wanted to make in terms of disclosure and the intelligence community.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate this. I appreciate the opportunity to pick your brain a little bit on this, Tim, because again, as much as I struggle to not have confirmation bias, you can't help it. It comes naturally sometimes. So it's always good to have an expert to pick it off, bounce it off of. As Jim might have said, I don't come out of this world. This has not by any means been my life's work. Outside of binging Ancient Aliens on a long weekend, that is the extent of the knowledge that I came into that I had, I should say, when these papers landed in my lap. And so, the past few years working through them, living with them, living in them, translating them, has really just been remarkable. And when with the recent the Wall Street Journal article and the Pentagon statements and all the rest of it, the framing and the context again becomes generates more questions than it does answers. While there's a lot of validity, to all of those arguments, and certainly to the generations of witness testimony, whistleblowers, and declassified documents and all the rest of it that come out. But one of the things I wanted to pick your brain about a little bit, and I know you have likely not seen this. So we recently ran an exercise, a test of sorts, let's say, where I extracted the core scientific topics from my father-in-law's body of work. And it ranges from MHD technologies to nuclear fusion to consciousness theories and exercises, and how consciousness interacts with the craft that he described. And I ran those just by subject matter, just by topic, never mentioning UFO or anything like that. I ran those deep search to identify parallels between reported U.S. government, public agency research, what research was publicly available, be it scientific, be it government, be it declassified documents, that covers these topics. These at the end of the day, there was 42 of them, 42 scientific topics compared against publicly available data. And was there any correlation between it? And I limited it to the time frame of 1980 to 2000. And I did that particularly because my assessment of my father-in-law's documents were that they were written between the mid-1980s through probably the mid-1990s, certainly a little bit beyond the fall of the Soviet Union. So the end result, the output of that exercise, was the identification of about 50 government agencies / programs, of up to about a $15 billion spend, where the topics are an 85 to 95% match over the same period. So I likened it to, I said, President Obama went in to get bin Laden on I think it was 60 to 80% correlation of the intel. We're at 85, 95% correlation of the programs. And the instant, I would say, challenge that I made to that is, well, is it just parallel research of generalized scientific topics? But the more I dove down into it and contextualized it to say, my father-in-law's work was done by during the Soviet Union years. He didn't have a lot of free time to frivolously examine an idea. We know these programs existed. They're all consolidated under this body of work. And perhaps what are the odds? What are what's the assessment, considering the Pentagon statements about the hazing type programs and all the rest of it, that in and of itself is, again, a correlation to say there was scientific work that was done on this subject matter that within the public domain could be explained, compartmentalized agency by agency. And that somewhere deep down, if Congress were to really have a look and go down the rabbit hole of where these bodies of work ended, could there potentially find an endpoint that all of these agencies' bodies of works filtered their way down to X number of complementary agencies? We know, at least from this work, and if we work off the premise that we know the Soviet Union was doing it around the theme of a UFO, what was the US government doing all of these similar programs in the same timetable? What were they basing it off of? If I frame that intelligently.
I understand. The existence of a government program to examine or understand some of the technology, some of the security concerns that were in parallel with the interest of those who thought the government may have a recovery and exploitation program, we found no evidence of. As a member of the Senior National Intelligence Service executive, working with Congress and justifying budgets and having GAO auditing what we're doing, putting together a program and milestone plan of how we spent the taxpayers' money, and how we could walk that, what our mission was, how we were funded in our programs of record to achieve our outcomes. The scale of that, what it would take to be able to execute the claims of the people who thought there was some type of covert program over a period of decades to recover, reverse engineer. We're talking billions and billions of dollars. And back in the 70s and 80s, that was real money. Okay, today it's a rounding error. It just can't be done. I have actually gone on missions and gone down and had a gym bag full of, brand new, $100 bills, tens of thousands of dollars, and gone out into town and purchased friendships, and information on a signature. Stuff like that could be done. But when we're talking billions, no, it's just not. Anyone who understands how the government works and we appropriate and the oversight, it can't be done. When we did our research on the historical report, we did find claims, working extremely closely with both the DoD and the ICIG, and both the Special Access Program Management at DoD and the Controlled Access Program Manager at ODNI. We found about claims of about 40 programs, SAPs and CAPs, that people claimed that were dealing with exotic material recovery and exploitation. And most of the people were not read into the programs. They had secondary or distorted or incorrect information of what the programs were. And the stories were quite similar. But as we looked into the claims, does our government have programs where we go after foreign technology? Do we retrieve parts from ballistic missile tests or aircraft cache? Is there a SRO program? And I know there is, because I used to run for the government. And, at times, we'll go places that don't want to be discovered to recover things so we can exploit them. People had imperfect or partial information of what we were doing. Did we recover exotic materials? And sometimes we didn't really understand where they came from, how they were developed. Absolutely. And every case that we examined, those materials, were invented by human beings and produced by human beings. We found nothing that was attributable, to a non-human intelligence or have an extra, terrestrial origins. We could not find it. Now, some say it wasn't done by the government. The government outsourced, and we had cleared commercial contractors that did that. But we met with them too. And that was one of the strengths that Sean Kirkpatrick brought to the program. His knowledge, his experience working in the missile defense, working in space awareness and space defense. The man had quite a resume and connections with industry. We actually met with the CEOs and the chief, technology officers to go back in the archives and what happened at this time. Often they were supporting covert or the development of very sensitive classified materials. And one of the things I've said in public many times, when we had people who came forward and made protected disclosures, their description of what they witnessed, we were able to determine was quite accurate. Their assessments were wrong.
Right.
They didn't know what they were looking at, but their descriptions were accurate. And these were educated, rational people, patriots who were legally present when something very sensitive was being demonstrated or tested. We saw that. There are other claims that we receive from people. I am not a medical professional, and I don't want to, as a government bureaucrat, I don't want to, make any claims as to their sanity. But one thing I can observe, that there were many witnesses that were apprehensive about coming to the government and sharing what they experienced, their firsthand experience as either a contractor or a government person, working some of these advanced technology programs. There was real fear there, and Congress had actually given us a list of people that they wanted us to contact and interview that had first-person insider experience in some of these cases, as presented to Congress and their investigative bodies. We were not always successful in convincing these individuals it was safe for them to meet with us.
All right.
And I can remember trying to convince an individual to go on to Nellis because we were having access to the skiff there, and we could relieve them of their NDA and discuss at any classification level what they wanted to share with us about their experience with UAPs. Refused to come on an airbase, and then I naively said, "Hey, the FBI has granted us use to the federal building. We can use their skiff." And that one, I got a worse reaction.
Doesn't make you feel any better, right?
And I didn't feel any better at all. They didn't trust that. And then we thought about how about a casino, a public place, and I get a lecture on how many people have been kidnapped or murdered.
Oh, God.
In casinos. So people had legitimate fears.
Yeah.
And what we found from witnesses, they actually accurately relayed what they saw. Now, when we got to the data, what it was, we kind of understood. And some of the images and the videos, and the tapes and the reports, there are some absolutely amazing technology that has been developed that, based off your education worldview, you could misconstrue or misidentify as something, coming from another advanced civilization other than our own. But we found no evidence, that our government was involved in some type of, sensitive operation to recover, reverse engineering. And we made many, many trips to places like Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson, out to going out to ranges in both Nevada, going out to Department of Energy sites to research the claims of witnesses. And we're talking testimony given under oath to members of Congress and their committees. And every case we had complete access. We could go wherever we wanted. And as an intel guy and a former Marine, I was amazed at our access to information and the cooperation from the government officials that were responsible for the management and protection of these sites. And every time, either as a deputy or as an acting director, when we went up to our political masters, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Principal Director of National Intelligence, and we were briefing and we were on schedule like every 2 weeks to go up and report our findings, one of the questions we routinely received, from the Senate confirmed officials, cabinet level officials, hey, are you getting the cooperation? Is there anything I can do for you? And I can tell you that everybody really wanted to solve this puzzle and, successfully understand what's been going on with this UFO, UFA business over the last 70 years. And Congress in its wisdom actually gave, AARO the authority, the resources to go after, research this, this topic and inform them. Now there's frustration by the public that there's things AARO can't share. Well, we're looking for aliens. We didn't find aliens when we found other things on other national security concerns. And often working with the intelligence community and DOD, there's serialized production, that goes through and thoroughly briefs what we found. We would get a report of a UAP, and when we researched it, it wasn't a UAP. It was a new adversary capability that was detected. And those are the types of things that AARO did that the public's never going to know, not for 50 years or so.
Right.
But we did inform Congress, and we did report back both through our DOD and our IC change of command. We did that.
One of the interesting things that sort of came up in my research and investigation, if we would call it that, looking back at Russia in modern terms, there again seems to be some parallels between the body of work that we're presenting and some of the intelligence, some of the statements that's come out of Russia over, let's say, the last 4 or 5 years, where it talks about some of its EMP ambitions, space-based weapons ambitions. It uses the term that they're according to new physical principles is one they throw around. Is there anything from your research in AARO or otherwise that you can speak to about the Russian threat, these developments and talk of space-based weaponry? Because again, there's a lot that parallels where I would say, again, there's foundational work, perhaps foundational science in the documents that we have. And that sort of spurred my concerns to try and pass it around and share it with the powers that be.
Space-based threats was beyond AARO's mission, and I don't want to speculate. Not my job, and in my knowledge of it is the fact that I did sign an NDA, and I'm not the person to share that in a public forum.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's totally fine, Tim. I guess maybe we have a couple minutes left because I understand that your time's limited.
At 1:45, I've got to run.
Absolutely, yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
It sounds like we were just talking a little bit when we were talking about the exotic materials. It sounds like we touched a little bit on the Wall Street, the part 2 of the article where they were asking if it was space junk, and then they talked a little bit about Dr. Davis. Was that some of our discussion, Tim, or was that
Sure.
different?
AARO was asked to examine space debris or materials that claim to have extraterrestrial origins, and we did that. We spent a lot of money. We worked primarily with the Department of Energy mission partners. We did double-blind tests. We gave it to the national labs, and these national labs are all part of the Manhattan program. Real credible science doing very scary things. We basically gave them to do a material analysis and report back. We have shared those reports. They're out there on the website. There's some new material that's being analyzed. AARO, that's part of what AARO does. As a service, that's part of, our mission mandate and the funding that we receive. To date, there has been nothing that we examined that the composition, the isotopes did not originate in this solar system. Nothing. And the claims that these materials had special properties, gravitational materials, or could not be duplicated, with the materials that we were asked to analyze, working with both the private sector and working for national labs, we could duplicate them, and we could not, in a lab, prove that these materials could behave in astonishing manners, as claimed by in some cases, the owners of the material. We actually brought some skeptics into the Pentagon and the bowels of the Pentagon and actually briefed them with our scientists. Now, our scientists were intimidated as hell by the community and didn't want to come public as working on this. The internet and social media can be very, very vicious if we do not support their claims. And AARO's not going to do that, and AARO will not be intimidated. We're going to do our assessment with the evidence that we can collect and collaborate, and we're going to call it as we see it. And I want to tell you, as a Marine and a civil servant, nobody censored our work. Now, were there concerns about the political sensitivity, and did we get a lot of calls from civil servants and political appointees concerned about what we found and the impact that would have on their agency or service? Absolutely. But we were given a mission by Congress, and we went back and reported back to the 12 oversight committees that we worked for, and through both the DOD and the IC chain of commands. And both of them were very, very clear on AARO to immediately report, certain events, certain things that we were uncovered. We had 48 hours to get that report back to them and tell them what happened. And there were things that AARO did report that, as we were able to do more analysis and we got more facts, we were able to clarify. A lot of times those initial reports are not always accurate. And we found that to be true. And as we developed more information, we helped the body of research. And in some cases, we helped enhance the effectiveness of weapon systems that made erroneous detections. We were able to do that. We had better understanding of how our sensors worked, how the software worked. And that's some of the things that AARO did. And in the law today, AARO is going to be a must-coordinate office now dealing with counter-UAS activities, because we developed a lot of expertise and we'll be able to leverage all the sensor capability across the U.S. government and our private sector partners to help detect and understand UAPs. Often we found things that were not UAPs.
Wow. That's Tim. We sincerely appreciate you joining us and fitting us into your really crammed schedule. It's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much, Tim.
Well, thank you, man. We can follow up and have a longer session sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Anytime. Thank you. And all right, have a great weekend, Tim.
You too. Out here.
All right. Bye-bye.